Hello there, everybody. Welcome along to EFL Debate. This is another summer deep dive. I'm covering all 72 clubs across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. There's already been a few that are up on YouTube and on Spotify, so go check those out and give us a subscribe or a follow. But for this one, I'm delighted to be joined by Adam Parks, Parksy as he's known from the excellent Lowdown podcast. Great to be on with you, Parksy. How are you?
I'm good. Having a nice break from football, but as always, can't wait to get back again.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, a wonderful season for Leyton Orient last year, and I suppose we can kind of marry up possibly some of the talk from some quarters over the relatively the slow transfer business. No one's come in just yet, and a few people are getting a little bit anxious, like right now, probably a minority, I would suggest, with maybe last summer when actually the fact that the recruitment maybe happened later maybe would have put a few people off Leyton Orient last season. And I know Richie Wellens, was kind of hoping for a quicker activity. So I guess my question to you would be, how did Leyton Orient achieve what they did last season? With, I suppose, the stability of the group that had put together a great run the year before.
I think it's just that. I think having that little window at the end of the season that Richie had when he took over from Kenny Jackett was invaluable. He obviously learned a lot about the players' mentalities, what was probably needed in terms of additions, who he wanted to keep and who he wanted to move on. So I think getting essentially real game time, putting his ideas into place was invaluable for him and invaluable for the squad, and it's borne fruit this year.
Yeah, of course. How do you sum up the impact Richie Wellens has had on Leyton Orient?
It's a massive mentality shift for not only the club but for the fans as well. It's been and maybe he was right to call it out, the little Leyton Orient mentality. We've always had this big idea that we will always be little Leyton Orient, and West Ham and Tottenham and Arsenal will always be the bigger clubs, which they will. But in terms of competing on certain levels, we probably sold ourselves short. And now that we're back at the level we were before the Italian came in, that impact can be seen, obviously, off the back of work from Justin and the board coming in 2017. But no, Richie Wellens is his own man. He's got his own ideas of how he wants to go about things. I think the board understand that. He likes working with Martin Ling, the director of football. He likes working for the club, which is a massive plus when you look at his history for some of the clubs he's worked for. Salford being the main standout of that. And he's got free rein. So it's a very strange situation that he can pretty much do what he wants and say what he wants, and all the fans are on his side, which is great. But that sometimes that sometimes impacts the other people that are involved in the recruitment process and the coaching process. So, Martin Ling gets the brunt of all the frustration usually, which is probably unfair.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you made that point, Parksy, because I wanted to expand on that a little bit. I'm a massive fan of Martin Ling, and I think that the reason for that is that football has become such a kind of calculated transitional industry in this modern era where so much of the business that goes on is a little bit underhanded, where it's like you're saying one thing to a certain group of people because you want to build relations, and you're probably saying another thing to another group of people, and then once that thing's done, you'll then change your position, and it's very very underhanded. I think a lot of the industry in football. What I love about Martin Ling is that he treats people properly, and he won't he'll, for example, if he wants to change a manager, I think he's someone who will speak to the manager that's in position first and tell them what the state of play is, and then start looking for another manager. Some fans might question that. Some fans might even criticize that because it's not how most clubs realistically run in the modern day. But I think that it's a way that really builds trust with people. And I think trust is so invaluable. So yeah, huge fan of Martin Ling.
Yeah, you might want to speak to to previous incumbents to the head coach position about how certain things went down. But generally, I think the culture of the club has changed, and it is obviously trying to operate as a business, but there is a challenge culture which Nigel Travis has put in, and he's given free rein on the football side to Martin Ling, and he's 2 promotions in 6 years. From where we were in 2017, essentially potentially going out of business, to go into the National League with only 6 players in our squad. The recruitment from that day, and we've only just got rid of Craig Clay, essentially. So, it's just one other person that has gone through those levels. It shows how good the recruitment process is. Martin Ling gets a bad rap. He does. And it's probably turning in his favour now, because if Richie keeps saying something, which he does, which he loves working with Martin, he loves what they do and how they interact with each other, then essentially it's another part of the Richie Wellens factor. It's, Richie may be Teflon, but I think Martin Ling's got a lot of support from the Orient fan base, myself included. I'll challenge constructively when and if I feel like I need to, but who am I? I'm just a fan.
So in terms of the summer so far, how are you kind of feeling in terms of the transfer activity, Paxi? Because I think there's a scale here, because I think if you get worried sort of officially, if you like, about slow transfer business too soon after winning the League Two title, and I think it might have been the club's first ever Football League title, you're thinking, come on, just enjoy those moments. But also there comes a time where attentions do turn to next season. Is there a part of you that's a little bit anxious to get a few faces through the door this week?
Right, we've had enough of West Ham fans saying that the only team in London won a trophy this season was West Ham United. We go back to the 50s and we got the Division 3 South title. So even though it wasn't the EFL, we did win a league title, but I'll hold back on that. In terms of recruitment, yeah, there's schools of thought where you take your time. This is where the Orient fans get a lot of communication from Martin Ling and Richie about taking your time and getting the right people in with the right mentality, the right personality, the Moneyball aspect of it. So making sure you get what's best for the squad and best for the team over names and sentimentality. The players that we potentially going to lose are big players for us, but that doesn't mean that there's there aren't other players out there that could fill the gap or potentially be better, either coming down from the Championship, youth players from the Premier League, or even players in the non-league. We don't know. And I think when you go up a league, you do wonder about some of the players that haven't played in a higher level, whether they'll be able to achieve what they've achieved at League Two and National League, like Happy. Sorry?
Well, I was just saying, such as?
Well, you've got people like Dan Happy, who had an excellent half of the season last year, who is out of contract, but we're hoping that he'll sign. How is he going to fare in League One? The other players around that, like Raul Sotirio, Jordan Brown, who'll be there next year, and how will Darren Prattley do at 38, 37, 38, in League One again? Losing a big personality like Lawrence Vigouroux, it looks very, very likely that he'll be gone. It's unlikely that we'll see Paul Smyth again, from what I hear. And keeping the spine of the team would have been very key going into the summer. It's what we get in now, and that's a big, big problem. And me personally, I'm not stressing about it yet. I think we'll get to the 30th of June, and then I'll start to worry a little bit if nothing happens. I'd expect some movement in the next few weeks, but there's a few Orient fans that are starting to get a bit nervous, looking at what happened to Forest Green last year when they lost a lot of their players. We don't particularly want to be the yo-yo team. I think there's a lot of ambition at board level to see where we can go without, financially crippling us. And you've seen some other teams go through the leagues that are potentially not as well funded as we are. And hopefully we can get some kind of few faces in the door in the next few weeks that may cheer up the Orient fan base who are a bit miserable.
Yeah, I think with Lawrence Vigouroux leaving and Paul Smyth, I think that certainly opens up a lot of concerns. I think if you're in those camp, you'd be comfortable with one of those players, two players leaving, but maybe losing both is going to be difficult. I mean, the club's got to make sure that they get the right players in as well, haven't they?
Yeah, I think losing Lawrence Vigouroux is massive, but he is a very unique goalkeeper in the bottom divisions. You know, if he does go to Burnley like it's being touted, he'll be third choice, potentially third choice. So, sorry to maybe do him out of position there, but a worst case scenario, he's got to take that move, hasn't he? He's got to go there, and he's got to have that opportunity to work with people like Vincent Company and have the potential of playing for a Premier League club. Worst case scenario for him is he'll go on loan to a Championship club or a top end League One club, won't he? So you can't besmirch him that. But Paul Smyth, we survived without him at times last year, and we've got people like Theo Archibald that can come in on that left hand side, and you know he was playing right hand side last year, but he could play the left hand side quite easily. And I think there's rumours. They are rumours. I don't know. You know, I can't clarify anything, but of the youngster from Crewe coming in. So, you know, he's one of the Aguier.
So there's who am I? My mind's gone completely blank. The lad who's playing up top for Crewe. I'm sure. I down a J.
That's it. Well, I can't say the surname yet, but we'll
Yeah.
get to that. We had enough time. We had enough problems with Paul Smith's mind. But you know, we survived without Paul Smith. So I think Vigouroux's a big miss. If we can get a goalkeeper that's solid, either experienced, been in the Championship or around the top end of League One, you know, as a consistent performer, that'll be a good start. Potentially a younger keeper would be a negative, I think, if he's untried. So we've also lost Sam Sargent.
Unless it's a loan move, Paxi, because sometimes what I've found in the last few years is that there's actually been some really good on loan goalkeepers in the EFL because a lot of the time clubs do favour experience, and therefore really good young goalkeepers actually slip through the net a little bit and end up at clubs where they're actually higher than that level. So I think I think sometimes you can do well off the loan market. That's kind of how I would try and replace the quality of Lawrence Vigouroux, because I think you'd struggle to replace him pound for pound in terms of a permanent signing unless it was Harry Lewis.
No, like, listen, we're not going to go into that again. But you know, I think I see your point, but I think there's always this, as a fan, there's this train of thought that goalkeepers come into their own. You know, what would you say? Would say mid 30s, they're at their peak, aren't they? And sure, if you get a 20, 21-year-old with no league experience, I mean, they're going to get some at some point. But you know, as a fan, you're probably more comfortable with a name between the sticks, or at least someone that you recognise, than a goalkeeping version of Ed Turns. Now, we loved Ed Turns, who came in from Brighton last year. Not many of us knew anything about him, and we absolutely loved him. Yeah. He had a couple of bumps in the road, but you know, if we had a goalkeeper that was the equivalent of Ed Turns come in, yeah, why not? That'd be great. But I think it's a big summer in terms of recruitment, and I think that one of the things that they will be looking at is to have a very strong league-ready goalkeeper, and potentially a backup goalkeeper that's on loan, like you say, or they'll go with Reece Byrne and maybe he'll step up to the bench.
Yeah, I don't know. I would actually go the other, flip your suggestion on its head and go for an exciting, high potential loanee, sort of England youth kind of type of goalkeeper, and then I'd go for a more reliable, experienced head as almost a backup who could be maybe a safe pair of fans just to come in and provide a bit of stability if the lone goalkeeper doesn't sort of transpire as hope. That's how I would approach it personally, because I think it's difficult to get a goalkeeper on loan if you're not planning to start them regularly, which I guess you mentioned Ed Turns there. It kind of links quite nicely into that conversation, because you've talked about whether Dan Happ's going to sign a new deal. Are Dan Happ and Ed Turns both going to be playing for Leyton Orient next season, or do you think it'll just be one of them, or neither?
Well, we got to throw in Omar Beckles as well. I mean, he's played League One already. He, you know, again, it's just rumours, but you hear that Beckles and Happy are going to come back, hopefully come back. You know, Orient being the fan base they are, it's, you know, like smoke signals. You kind of, someone sees them walking down the street and whatever, I don't know. But yeah, Happy and Turns wouldn't have played that level, but I think they earned it. Definitely Dan Happy last year, the first half of the season. I mean, he would have probably been competing with Lawrence Vigouroux as our player of the season if he'd have kept up his form and hadn't got injured.
Mm.
He was definitely probably our best player up until Christmas. Ed Turns started slowly, but once he got up to the speed of Richie Wellens' tactics, he was essential. So yeah, I mean, would we love to have Ed Turns back? Yes. Would we love to have someone you may talk about back? Yes, but we're probably not. You know, there's a lot of bigger fish trying to find Idris, aren't they? So yeah, it's a weird summer because we're trying to go between consolidation in our heads and our heart, which is we've seen Luton jump up straight away and Plymouth jump up straight away, more or less, and we think that potentially we've got some aspirations to be in the top half of the table. And then you look at some of the teams in there, and you realise that those teams that are in that division are teams that we are used to playing in and around that level. So I don't think we'll be out of place. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on our back four, though.
Yeah, I think top half would be realistic if you're keeping the likes of Smyth and Vigouroux. I think that would be something to strive for. But I think with the losses of two of those key players and maybe more, we don't know. You wonder whether it's going to start to look a little bit more like a season of survival being really the primary aim for Leyton Orient, which would, by the way, be a great season because you've not been at this level for 8 years now. So yeah, a bit of a tricky campaign potentially. But you mentioned Idris El Mazouni there. How important is keeping him going to be?
I think for the way we play, you know, we Pratley won't be playing every game. He'll be managed. George Moncur is obviously a more attacking option. You're going to need someone like Idris El Mazouni in our midfield if you want to be competing with the midfields that are going to be in League One next year. If he gets a championship move again, you can't begrudge the lad that. I mean, he's not our player at the end of the day. He came in, he did a job. I think he bought into the mentality of not only the manager's tactics, but the fans as well, and the fans fell in love with him. It would be massive. Let's put it this way: if we lose Viggs, and then we lose Happy, and then we lose Mizuno, Mizuno, and we lose Paul Smyth, in each of those parts of our team will be much weaker. But if we could keep the back, the people at the back and Mizuno, then the goalkeeper and I think up front we're okay. So we'd love him back. I think Nigel Travis has said he loved him back. We'd love to have him back when we interviewed him a few weeks ago. I think it's been no secret that he's loved by the coaching team and the fans. So look, come back, guy. Just you're loved. Come back for a year in League One with the O's.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact Ipswich have won promotion to the Championship, and they're probably going to be quite ambitious at that level, that maybe leans you more towards the direction of.
They're going to go for it, aren't they? They're going to really go for it in a Championship. So I mean, someone like Idris, who maybe a fourth or fifth down the pecking order last year, he's going to be further down because they're obviously going to spend some money with the backing they've got. So I think he knows he's probably going to go out somewhere, but where does he go? Does he go somewhere to prove himself in the Championship, playing at the likes of Plymouth, or does he go in League One in a familiar environment where he already knows how someone plays and he can continue to look good? It's an interesting choice to make.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully he can. Hopefully he's back in E10 next season. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of other midfield additions. I've mentioned Ethan Brierley as a potential signing for Leyton Orient. Funny enough, he's now gone to Brentford B team. I wouldn't expect him to be playing for them in the Premier League, so he's definitely a loan option that I think Orient should look at, possibly to rotate with Darren Pratley for certain home games, or possibly to come in for El Mazouni or even replace him. But how many midfield additions would you be expecting?
Well, we've lost Clay, and obviously if El Mazouni doesn't come back, with Pratley being the age that he is, the reality says that we've got two midfielders at the moment, which is Jordan Brown and Darren Pratley, to play in a holding central midfield role, and George Moncur will play just in front. I'd say we need two, at least two minimum, to come in if you're looking at it that way. And knowing the way that they work, they probably got the whole board of midfielders that they're going to try and get in. A lot of free agents around this time of year, a lot more it seems than there has been before, and potentially some really good ones out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me about the fullback positions, Parksy, because I feel like that's quite an underrated facet, possibly, of Richie Wellens' sides, where he seems to like fullbacks that are comfortable on either foot, that can come inside at times, that have a good work ethic. Rob Hunt is one who he's worked with at 2 or 3 clubs and has found to be very reliable. 3, I think it is, with Oldham and Swindon before. How important are they to the Richie Wellens team?
They're very, attacking. Not so much Rob Hunt, but if Rob Hunt plays on the left and Tom James plays on the right, it gives Tom James a little bit of a license to push on, because obviously Rob Hunt will then tuck in, making it a kind of a 3. It is really important. But then again, these players have earned this right to try and acquit themselves at League One, and that includes Jaden Sweeney as well, who's probably a little bit better at getting forward than Rob Hunt is. So again, there's 3 players there that are going to be fighting for potentially. Tom James can play left back as well. Rob Hunt can play right back. We've got Jordan Brown, who's played right back, centre back, central midfield, holding midfield. So he's another player that can fill in at the fullbacks. I'd expect one more to come in, though, at least, potentially to give Tom James some competition at right back, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Jaden Sweeney, actually, Paxi, because he looks like he's got some real balletic qualities about him. Watching him, I wouldn't necessarily say he's super quick or explosive, but he seems to be able to sort of be in a crowd of opposition players and still come out of it with the ball. And he looks like he's got really good link-up play about him as well. So that's a really exciting prospect by the looks of things.
Yeah, exuberance of youth. I mean, the guy got his chance last year and really took it, especially playing for Richie Wellens. And he'd looked good at time prior to Richie coming in. And, he's got, you're right, he's not the quickest that we've potentially seen, but over the first couple of yards, he can turn on a sixpence, he can get out of very, very tight situations, which is obviously quite good in League Two. League One will be obviously a step up, and there will be, watching a lot of the playoffs and the top teams in the playoffs, Sheffield Wednesday and Peterborough and the like. There's a little bit more time on the ball, so I think it'll be interesting to see how our younger players and the players that haven't played in the higher division will do with the extra time on the ball.
Could they be better for the extra time on the ball?
Potentially. I mean, we've got a young lad called Chad Ogie who played the majority of last season, but sometimes when he's not thinking, he does the best things you'll see a centre back do. He'll take the ball out, and sometimes when he's got time, he doesn't particularly do well with the ball. So from the looking at the defence onwards, it's going to be interesting, right? I could go through every single position and say it will be interesting to see Omar Beckles playing in League One again. Someone who I've got utmost respect for, but I have at times been critical of him. If he's going to be going up the field and leaving Happy, who's not the quickest centre back, behind him, what's that going to do? Again, touch wood that they sign. But yeah, I think Jaden Sweeney's got a big year ahead of him. Essentially, it's going to be one of those ones where if we stay in League One, he's going to be wanting to play in League One, or he'll be wanting someone to look in the Championship and say, that Sweeney looks like a good guy, and maybe we should give him a chance at a higher level.
Yeah, for sure. Let's hope that's the case, because that's the sort of model that Orient have got to move towards. You mentioned Omar Beckles there. he's obviously one of the experienced heads, and he's one who's played, unlike a Dan Happ, for example, he's one who's played at League One level before. In fact, he made League One Team of the Year in 17-18, playing out of position at left back for Shrewsbury when they got to the player final that year under Paul Hurst. So that shows he's got something about him on the ball. How important do you think his experience is going to be in terms of negotiating that level?
He's an older head. I mean, if you look at our team last year, they weren't particularly old. I mean, you've got George Moncur, who's a little bit older, but the youngsters up front, Sotirio Kelman, you've got Archibald, who's not the oldest. You've got Jordan Brown, you've got Jaden Sweeney, Dan Happy, Ed Turns. I think someone like Omar he's a leader. He's respected. He's respected by people outside of Leyton Orient Football Club. And obviously to carry that persona, that personality, that respect means a hell of a lot, especially if we're going to have young players around him. So he's got a big job as a player, but he's got a bigger job, I think, as a talisman and as a leader for our squad.
Yeah, for sure, and hopefully he can have that, can play a really important role. You mentioned Jordan Brown earlier, and I wondered if because there was part of me was wondering if the club is going to recruit an understudy to Darren Pratley this season, because I probably wouldn't expect him to necessarily start quite as often as he did in League Two at 39. I think he's going to be now. But you've got Jordan Brown in there, so is there the possibility of Jordan Brown maybe coming into the fold a bit more, or do you still expect yourselves to bring in one more number 6?
Again, another player who's got the chance to impress. Jordan Brown was excellent last year until he got injured. He came in, played in multiple positions, and didn't let anyone down. And players like Jordan Brown, with the skill that he's got a great range of passing. He makes very few mistakes, and he doesn't let you down. And if you've got a player like that in your squad, I could see him just being number one on Richie's team sheet, regardless.
Should we set up the nickname Jordan Brown? Don't let you down.
Well, there you go. See, but perfect poetry.
Every time I use his name, I'm gonna say that.
But he hasn't, and I think to be at his age, which he's not the youngest, but he's still in his early 20s. To again, a cynical fan base at times. The fan base can be. Sure. Jordan Brown won them over, and he was part of the Kenny Jackett revolution, the January transfer window that will go down in infamy. And he's the only one that's left. So it kind of says a lot about his character, his drive, his determination to leave Derby to come to League Two. He obviously saw an opportunity, and fair play to the lad. He seems like a very nice guy, very well spoken, and he's a bloody good footballer. So
is George Moncur. Absolute class act, class above League Two, really. I didn't even think George Moncur was necessarily playing at absolute full pelt, maximum capability last season, but he was still, it felt like he was still streets above the level. So, how important is he going to be in League One?
Velcro George, the ball sticks to his feet, doesn't it? It's you don't see much quality like George Moncur down Leyton Orient. We've had some good players over the years. Sean Thornton was a mercurial talent in League One.
What era was he?
Was that?
What era was he?
That was the 2000s, the late 2000s under Martin Ling. Okay. Martin brought him in. So we were in League One, his first season in League One, I believe, and a year after as well. And Ian Bogey in the mid-90s when he came to us from Millwall.
Did he play under Andy Sinton, or?
You're going back now.
The interesting thing is, I think the 94-95 side, I've got this weird bit of trivia where Orient opening day of 94-95 beat my team Birmingham 2-1.
2-1 first game of the season.
And then you ended up finishing bottom that season, and then we won the league. It's just one of those weird quirks. And
we played during the semi-final with whatever the JPT was. I can't remember then.
Would it be
Leyland Daft or windscreens or whatever it was. I think George Moncur is I don't think he was fit. I don't think he is fit. I think there's been comments about his knee. So he's maybe been managed. And he's made a joke of it about being overweight, although I'd wish I was his type of overweight. Um, but you know, is the talent that he's got. If he has the right people playing with him in midfield and supporting him, I mean, he's a fulcrum. He gets the ball in, passes it out, little inside passes. Love, you know, he's a great finisher. He's a penalty taker that we haven't had for a long time as well. We've missed a lot of penalties in the in between the time of Macaulay Bonne and George Moncur. So George Moncur's a magician. George Moncur, my lord.
Absolutely. You mentioned there in terms of the earlier in terms of the wide forward addition positions if Paul Smyth were to leave, and I know you speak very highly of Theo Archibald, but Paul Smyth is the type of player who can just create something out of nothing. He's not only is he a ball of energy and such an exciting player, but he's also just incredibly skillful. He's another magician, really, I would call him. And I just want, is Theo Archibald going to quite be able to replace that productivity? Are you going to have to try and recruit? Are you going to have to do some magic in the loan market, a little bit like what we talked about with Lawrence Vigouroux? Yeah, how are you feeling about that side of things?
I think when Theo joined us on loan originally under Kenny Jackett, the first half of the season he was electric. He dropped his shoulder and beat a man on the outside. When Matt Harrell took over the team in interim before Richie Wellens took over, he switched him to the right, and it seems that it's stuck. So he's got that option to go inside and take a shot on or play the ball through. So I think Theo Archibald is a different player to Paul Smyth. Paul Smyth is a player. Every time he got the ball in an Orient shirt, we were on the edge of our seats wondering what's he going to do. And more often than not, he beat the man every single time, or numerous men. And he scored some absolutely terrific goals as well. Is he irreplaceable? His type of player is irreplaceable. Do I worry that Richie Wellens won't be able to replace him in a system that he creates? No, I don't worry, because in Richie Wellens we trust. So even if it's a case of tweaking the system that it incorporates a different player or a different type of player, Richie's a bit intelligent in that way, and I'm pretty sure Brendan Pitcher, who
Oh yeah,
we called knowledge on the
football
podcast, and
manager research, wasn't he? Isn't it?
he was gobsmacked after one of the games near the end of the season. I believe it was the Carlisle game that we won 1-0. That he made a massive adjustment at the back. That was just a slight tweak, but it changed the whole game, because Carlisle were all over us. And in terms of getting a player that fits in, Paul Smyth potentially isn't the player that Richie Wellens would have recruited for that left-hand side. So we'll see. In Richie, we trust in that one, and if it's Theo Archibald or if it's a player that comes in, I'll be more than happy. But I think, Paul Smyth, one in 100. I won't say a million, because obviously there's a lot of footballers, but he has a special quality about him that hopefully the Orient will have next year. But someone will have him, and they'll be very grateful for him if he stays fit.
Of course, absolutely. What about Kieran Sadlier? Any chance you get him back from Bolton?
Don't know. There's rumours that there was a clause in the loan that if we went up, we could sign him permanently. He didn't do badly. He had some really good games, but he's not, like you say, Paul Smyth. And again, could he challenge Theo if Theo was on the left? I don't know. Would he be a good squad player? Yes. He's got some quality on the ball. Defensively, he was probably lacking at times positionally, but we won the league. Like you're getting me to say negative things about players that I know you're not doing it on purpose, but I'll start doing that. He did what he was asked to do, and he had some highlights in that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully he can have another good season. But I would probably go back to it and say, in order to, you're going to have to replace 2 or 3 fantastic players for Orient last season, and I think I would venture. I would go as far as to say that it's going to be really difficult to replace that quality pound for pound in the permanent market. I think you're probably going to look at a loan in a couple of those areas and then invest other in terms of improving the squad in other areas in permanent deals. But I think the loan market could be the key to replacing that quality on the short term basis, which I suppose brings me to the situation up top, where Martin Ling said that the club is going to be in the market for two strikers. Do you think it's correct for the club to look at two strikers rather than one?
Yeah, Charlie Kelman was a loanee, um, and Aaron Drinnan didn't have the best season last year. There were times when he was quite frustrating. Raul Sotirio scored a few in the second half of the season, and he had some purple patches. But you probably need to have in League One someone who's done it there to lead that line. And there's not many players around that can press in a Richie Wellens style formation. The Macabon rumours won't go away. Fans are quite divided in that, just purely because of what's happened elsewhere. But he did it in half a season at Ipswich, didn't he? So
you wouldn't, Paxi, you wouldn't be able to get him now if the last few years had gone completely to plan for
100%. 100%. I'm just telling you exactly what some of the fan base would say. Would I take Macabon? 100%, because the player that left us in 2019-20 is not the player now. He's got a lot more experience. He's played at championship level. He's scored goals at championship level. Has he been, putting him in every week? No, but he hasn't been playing in teams that have been up the top of the league. So, would he benefit playing if Paul Smyth stayed and Macabon was up top? You tell me, Leyton Orient ain't going to score goals next year. I think that's one of the things that you could criticise our forwards last year was we weren't clinical enough at times, and there were other teams that were more clinical than we were. They were just not as good defensively as we were. So I think Macabon is a player that would get, even if we were in the bottom half of the table, I'd say you'd get 10 to 15 goals minimum, which would be a start at League One, and then everyone else could chip around. So I would take Macabon in a heartbeat. But again, there are a few players out there that potentially are out of our salary range. That's the key thing as well. There's a lot of players that we would probably potentially want to do get in the building, that we can't afford. And we were in League Two getting League One ready players so that when we got to League One, we could compete and then we can build on it. To get Championship players into League One, you're talking about a differential of potentially £5,000 to £10,000 a week.
And that's a dangerous thing, because you don't want to try and stretch that far and then it risks, jeopardising club, which Kent Teague, Martin Ling, Nigel Travis, they're not going to do to this club, are they?
No, and it goes back to what I said earlier. It's about the Moneyball type of situation. There will be players that have got championship experience who may be in League One and haven't got a club, that potentially, sorry for the motorcycle going past, if you could hear that, that may be without a club that will take League One money now, because they're either 29, 30, 31, and they'll make a difference to our squad. Are we going to compete with the Burnleys and keeping people like Lawrence Vigouroux? No. So, that differential between Championship and League One has been discussed so much during the end of our season, and especially by Mark Devlin and Nigel Travis and Kent Teague, that I think we're all very well versed that if we go up to the Championship at some point in the next 2 to 3 years, more investment will have to come on board, because we simply wouldn't be able to compete in any way, shape or form. We'd be doing a Wickham, essentially, going up and going down every couple of years. So I think that the reality is that we will get some good players in, because Richie Wellens has got a good head on him. Martin Ling's got a good network, and they will work together to get some really good players in. But they have to fit the Leyton Orient model. And if they don't fit in that model, then they're not going to break the bank to bring someone in who's not prepared to work hard, to play hard, to be part of a group, and to want to be winners. And I think that's one thing that was quoted in the EFL report article about Richie Wellens today or yesterday that I saw on Twitter. Richie's a winner, so he wants winners. So people want to win things and be successful. That's their primary goal. Yeah, you've got to have the money side of the game, but you want to be part of something. And I think that's where we were successful last year, is that the group of players that played for Richie last year wanted to be part of what Richie was building, and they bought into it. He's not going to get people in on 10 grand a week, which we couldn't afford anyway. Just to do that. We've done that in League One before. It wasn't successful. And look at the players that we had playing in League One then. Andrea Desena, Darius Henderson, Joby McAnuff in his first stint, just to name a few, although that was different cloud cuckoo land. But, it doesn't work paying silly money. So I have every trust that we'll get people in. Again, you said about loans up front, that what would be wrong with Charlie Kilman being second, third choice, striker?
Third choice striker, Charlie Kelman in League.
If you get two more strikers in and you get a loan in, I mean, you don't know, do you? If Macabon comes in, there's other people out there without a club. My dream signing, it won't happen again. It might be wages. Would be Josh Koroma. Could you imagine a Leyton Orient team, a replacement for Paul Smyth, being Josh Koroma on the left-hand side and then having Macabon back up top in League One? Of course, I'd love that. That's my dream. But there'll be Orient fans that may be watching this or watch this back and going, are you out of your mind? Because why would we want to go back? Well, sometimes it's good to go back, We spent years wanting Moses Odubeju to come back, and now people don't want him back because he's got bad knees. But we spent years wanting Gab Zakiani to come back, and they all played higher levels. So, Josh Brown has proven it, If he's out of a club, let's pull the heartstrings. Let's say, look, we'll pay you a decent whack. We'll put a win bonus on it, whatever. Let's play Football Manager for a second and pretend we know how contracts work. And come and play for Leyton Orient for 2 years again with Macabon, your best pal that you had such a fruitful season in 2018-19.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's. I do think that this Orient fan base, obviously fans are really excited about coming into the level, and after what was achieved, it was an incredible achievement. But I think with a couple of the key players leaving and some of the uncertainty of that and no signings up to this point, I don't want to underestimate the challenges that Leyton Orient are having at this level in terms of the financial gulf. I'm well aware of that, and I really respect what the club's doing in terms of having such a sustainable model, and I think you're really lucky to have the people at the club that you've got. I would caveat that with saying that I think that Orient could do with one signing, a bit like a Josh Koroma or a bit like a Macabon, that just get fans to say, "Wow, we're really excited for the new season," just to bring a bit of the buzz back. I'm not saying that's not there after what's been achieved, but just a marquee signing that just sparks the summer into life. I think that could be what Orient need at the moment.
I agree with you, and there's part of me that lives in the real world that suggests that this may play out a little bit longer than we'd like it to.
Sure.
But there's another part of me that on the 1st of July wants to wake up to a tweet from Leyton Orient saying these 7 players have signed and we've actually got a kit, because we're well behind a lot of clubs, and then that may be by design. It may be because of sponsorship rights issues, but I'd like to see 6 or 7 signings, loan or whatever, free transfers, just lined up in our new kits going, there we go, we're ready for 2023-24. That's what I'd like. The reality is, I think exactly what I said. I think it's going to go long. I think we're going to play the market for what it is, and then we might get some good players that have struggled to get into a level of club they would aspire to be at.
How many more additions are you expecting then, Paxi? And how many of those additions are going to have to go straight into the best 11?
I would like 7. Not to go into the first 11, but I'd like 7 decent signings. The marquee ones, as we probably discussed. I'd like another centre back. I'd like a big, strong centre back that has played the level or even above. There's a fellow at Barnsley, I can't remember. Is it Moore? Tyler Moore, is that right? Is that right name? I don't know. Anyway,
Taylor Moore, who's
that's it. Yeah, I think he's an excellent player, and I know that he's being touted that potentially he's looking for a club. That kind of player, I would like to have him in. A couple of really good players up top, and maybe one real. I mean, if we got Mizuni back on loan or potentially permanent, then great, super. That'd be one already in. But I think 7 overall, replacing the 2 that of the 4 that I think will go, which will be Vigouroux and Smyth, would be enough for us to do well. And bear in mind what I think well is in League One is 16th. That to me would be doing well next season. There would be some that argue that 20th is doing well, and I see their point. But then we thought playoffs was the reality for last season, and we essentially walked the league.
Mm.
So 16th, with the caveat that I'd like to be 11th. But it's who knows? Who knows in football, right? You don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's Wigan if we're gonna are going to lose any more points or what. So it kind of there's little permutations about where we could end up in the league next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll have to wait and see on that one. Based on what's been achieved last season, and the fact that you're keeping a lot of the players, albeit might lose a couple of the most important ones, I feel like I know a lot of the reasons to be massively in favour of Leyton Orient and excited about what Richie Wellens is building, and reason to think that this trajectory is going to continue. I wanted to ask you though, bearing in mind that in about a month's time I've got to come up with my 1 to 24s, which are always interesting. What would be the reason to be a little bit concerned for Leyton Orient for next season?
I think if you asked me in a week, I could give you a more clearer answer. I think right now, if you were to push me on it, it would be the lack of activity. Potentially missing out on some really good players that we could have attracted to the club. But then if other people are throwing money around, we can't argue with the reasoning for not going for those players. I think it would be strength in depth. If we don't get the right players in, it could be strength in depth. I don't see us being Forest Green Rovers. I don't see us being in that dire situation of having to sign a hell of a lot of players, which is a plus. There will be certain continuity there from the season prior. So the togetherness should still be there. So if they get the right people in. But the concern, I think, is it will be strength in depth if we don't get the quality that we need.
Yeah, well, let's hope it's a busy couple of weeks for the Orient. Any young lads that have come through the academy that I should be excited about? We've obviously seen Dan Nakrima get the move to Middlesbrough this summer. Anyone else coming through on the conveyor belt?
Well, we just signed. A lad, Emmanuel Harvis, has just signed his first professional contract. So it'll be interesting to see how much time he spends around the bench or in the team. Dan Nkrumah didn't get the opportunities. It was probably obvious why. It's because we had a squad that was, essentially injury free for the majority, and his position was taken by some very, very experienced and quality players. But there always are some really good players that come through our academy that we don't even hear about sometimes because they just get pinched by other clubs. Your Teddy Perkins was an example. The young lad up top, who's Sheffield United potentially. I think it's Sheffield United or maybe Notts Forest. I can't. He played for us. I can't remember what life of me who it is. Right, Sonny Perkins. No, Leeds up front for Leeds. Was it Leeds?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, you're testing me here.
Yeah. No. Anyway, I know you can't edit it, so anyone watching, just I'm getting towards middle age. But yeah, we've got some players that we don't see a lot of our players because they just get bought by other teams, and I think it won't be the right environment to give them that opportunity next year. It'll be more the youth side of the team will be the Jordan Browns and the Jaden Sweeneys, and obviously Jaden Sweeney and Raul Sotirio both came through our academy. Potentially Reece Byrne as a backup goalkeeper. I thought he looked excellent last year during our Papa John's trophy campaign. What it was.
Big season for Sotirio, do you think?
If I was to be harsh, he's a player that goes on little spurts of form, and then he's anonymous for months. And if he was he did that in National League, and he did that in League Two as well. But when he's hot, his finishing's exceptional, but sometimes his first touch isn't the greatest. So when you're trying to play possession football and passing, the first touch is quite key. But yeah, I mean, again, he's a young kid. He works hard in the summer. Who knows? I had my Raw Soterio out on loan hat on in January, and he stayed and he made a difference to the running. So happy for him to prove me wrong. Again, he's an Orient player, and I'll support him to the hill. Yeah, I think it could be one of those seasons where if we do get people like Macabon and Josh Koroma in, again, Josh Koroma in, I don't see Raw Soterio displacing those players. So if we do get two strikers in, they're going to be ahead of Raw Soterio, aren't they? So I could see him, if he doesn't make an impact early, going out on loan to a League Two club, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably venture a case that the furthest Leyton Orient can go under the current regime is a stable, sustainable League One club, which, relative to the club's history, I think you'd say that would be very fair. Because I have a huge amount of respect for the job, well, first of all, that Martin Link has done, but also for the job that Nigel Travis has done in terms of stabilising the club after such a difficult position, and then being part of the club's journey up the leagues under Justin Edinburgh and now Richie Wellens. And I think there's a debt of gratitude to Kent Teague, to Nigel Travis, to all these people for the role they've played. And yet, if the club was to put their ambitious hat on and think, how can we get into the Championship in the next 5-10 years? Does there need to be a change of ownership, and how far down the line do you think that is?
I think they're a safety blanket for us at the moment in terms of having continuity, having a clear voice, having constant communication, and having that message, always going out. But they have been very honest that if they got to the Championship, they will be stretched financially, and they will have to look for other investment or potentially looking for other people to take on the club. But the plus point of that is that there are going to be pro-Barry Hearn people, and there wouldn't have been an Orient, etc., that will say that, and I was until recently. And there will be anti-Barry Hearn, and we've got a true supporter in Nigel Travis that is running our football club. So if he was to sell to another investor or another buyer, I wouldn't be happy, but I'd be, calm in the knowledge that it's been done in the right way. He would have vetted them so many times. He's a business. He comes from a business background that would have been, at the high end of the retail and hospitality chain. So he's dealt with difficult situations. And he knows, he can smell the crap that some people are shoveling. So I would be looking at probably them selling if we get that successful. At worst, at best, them staying but getting an investor, such as players that are already invested in football. I mean, in a crazy world, you get Romeo Beckham on a 1-year deal, and then suddenly David Beckham wants to put some money in your football club. That's fine. I mean, maybe that's why Brentford are looking at it. But there's a lot of people with a lot of money out there now, especially in football, especially in this country. And I'm talking about footballers. Harry Kane's already helped us out before. Who knows what his pet project will be in 6 years' time? Earning what he's earning. I don't know. I think we're a way off that, and they're not going to get any younger. And I think there will be a change at some point. But let's just enjoy the ride now and let them find their way. I trust them like I trust Richie. They'll do the right thing, which has to be for the football club, which is their whole diktat since they've been in. It's do the right thing for Leyton Orient. We'll always do the right thing for Leyton Orient, whether it's recruiting or dismissing managers, whether it's recruiting players or letting players go. It's always about doing what's right. And I'm glad that we've got the ownership that we've got to make that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% echo your sentiments, Parksy. Talk to me about Leyton Orient, the Lowdown podcast, then. What are your plans for next season?
Carry on doing what we're doing. We'd like to evolve every now and again. We've obviously got features that we run and are sometimes hard to carry on doing with full-time workers. All the great shows that the Orient fans have got. There's not many clubs in the low league that have got as many as us, including the Orient Hour and the Orient Outlook being two, plus all the fan-led ones as well that are you can find on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So what are we doing? And we've got a couple of new panelists. I'm going to try and get more of the ladies' game involved in our podcast as well. So it's two new panelists we've got coming in next year: Dan Slawinski and Rhiannon Harrison. So we're hoping to kind of like be a bit more diverse in that way, to bring more fans in on it as well as guests. But to meet more fans, obviously around the UK, because there's another group of clubs that we now get to converse and discuss football with, and that's what football's all about, isn't it? Like, this is the summer, and luckily there's the Ashes on at the moment, which is a big distraction for sports folk. But when football's off, it's quite boring, isn't it? Really, every Saturday waiting for the results, and you realise that you're not getting any.
Yeah, well, hopefully Leyton Orient can get some results next season after an outstanding season last year. Patsy, such a pleasure to chat Orient with you. I encourage everyone to go follow the Lowdown podcast at LO_podcast on Twitter. Thanks so much for your time, Patsy. I really appreciate it. Thanks to you for watching at home. This has been EFL Debate, the Leyton Orient Summer Deep Dive, and we'll see you again very soon.